A massive, high-ranking labyrinth portal has just manifested right in the middle of Shibuya, forcing the military to issue an immediate evacuation order for all nearby residents, as the ominous gate crackles with unstable magical energy and terrifying power, while soldiers desperately try to keep the terrified crowd from trampling each other. Among the chaos, a little girl gets separated and stares back in absolute horror, realizing she is standing directly in the path of whatever is coming out. This year is 2020-something, and Japan is about to face its worst nightmare, because the portal is already beginning to hatch like a giant cosmic egg, unleashing a massive, metallic dragon-like monster that looks ready to destroy the city. Its heavy metal foot slams onto the asphalt, shattering the street instantly, revealing a towering, armored beast that completely dwarfs the surrounding military forces, and its glowing purple eyes lock onto the soldiers waiting in the streets. Promptly, the tank division captains order their units to lock and load, even though the civilian evacuation is still far from being fully completed. But if they do not stop this mechanical nightmare here, everyone will die. So the armored division lines up their sights on the colossal threat and unleashes a devastating volley of tank fire directly at the beast. This military unleashes a massive barrage of tank fire directly at the colossal beast, engulfing the mechanical dragon in a sea of blinding flames and explosive force, while military helicopters circle above to assess the damage through the thick smoke. But to everyone's absolute horror, the target is still completely active and undamaged, leaving the tank crew utterly speechless after their armor-piercing shells did absolutely nothing. As the mechanical beast locks its glowing purple eye directly onto their position, charging up a devastating blast of concentrated magical energy to wipe them out, which it unleashes in a blinding beam of pure destructive power across the street, instantly vaporizing the entire tank division and shattering the surrounding asphalt into dust. Terrified citizens scream in absolute panic and scramble to escape the rapidly spreading devastation, because these mysterious structures known as labyrinths have completely rewritten the rules of reality, making all of humanity's modern weaponry completely useless against the monsters pouring out, resulting in nothing but ruined cities and a new threat simply called enemies. Soon, smaller armored beasts begin swarming out of the portal to hunt down survivors, leaping from the sky to ambush the crowd as people run for their lives, striking down anyone unfortunate enough to lag behind in the chaotic scramble for safety. And in the middle of this nightmare, a little girl trips and falls, watching helplessly as one of the armored beasts lunges directly at her, staring death in the face as the creature's razor-sharp claws close the distance, until a sudden flash of light cuts through the darkness to change everything. A red-haired hunter suddenly blitzes through the air, slicing the armored beast in half, while the terrified little girl shields her head, clutching her bunny plushie in absolute shock, because humanity actually has a secret weapon against these seemingly invincible mechanical monsters. Special gear recovered from the depths of the dungeons that can bypass their defenses, known as ancient weapons that are capable of slicing through alien armor like butter. And this mysterious savior happens to be wielding one of these incredibly rare relics. Looking incredibly smug, the red-haired warrior turns his gaze back toward the trembling child, casually asking if she is still alive with a completely relaxed grin on his face. But she can only stare back in utter bewilderment at his glowing crimson eye, wondering who this bizarrely overpowered guy is as he stands tall against the ruined skyline. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms over them as another armored beast crashes onto the street. Instead of panicking, the hunter just chuckles and asks if she is curious about his eye, completely ignoring the terrifying metallic predator that is currently salivating directly behind his back, while even more mechanical monsters begin swarming down from the sky to surround them, prompting our protagonist to casually point at his face while the beast prepares to strike. This monster unleashes a devastating purple energy blast point blank at the oblivious hunter, vaporizing the entire street in a massive explosion of destructive magical power. Yet as the smoke clears, both of them are standing completely untouched inside a massive crater, as the hunter explains with a fierce grin that his eye is actually a bit special, revealing the legendary Regulus weapon, a supreme king's armament that far surpasses all modern technology. A glowing golden gear of pure magical energy suddenly manifests in the aether, leaving the little girl completely speechless as she looks up at the strange phenomenon, which turns out to be a broken gravity field that freezes a flying car mid-air, all thanks to the intricate magical crest rotating inside the hunter's glowing red eye, completely stopping the incoming monster attacks dead in their tracks before they can land, revealing the legendary eyes of chronostasis that can freeze anything within his field of vision. This trembling kid can only stare in absolute awe at this ridiculous display of power. However, this godlike ability comes with a massive catch that the hunter knows all too well, as a futuristic system interface pops up to display his rapidly ticking life expectancy, showing that every single second he uses this power literally chips away at his lifespan, dropping his remaining years down right before his eyes with every passing moment. But none of that matters to him when there is a giant monster to slay, so he casually draws a sleek black firearm to prepare for his next attack, even though running out of time means instant death as he sacrifices another 30 days. Instantly, the weapon's holographic HUD blares to life as the cartridge begins to reload, filling up the energy bars with a steady stream of his sacrificed life force, while his crimson eye glows with an even more intense and terrifying magical light, channeling the raw power directly into the barrel of his high-tech gun. prompting the system to confirm the double activation of his chronostasis eyes is complete, and leaving him fully loaded with enough destructive energy to vaporize anything in his way. This system interface blares with warnings as the charged particles begin focusing inside his weapon, prompting a holographic targeting reticle to lock onto the terrifying beast standing before him, which is still frozen solid in time alongside the debris scattered across the ruined street. With a wild grin, the hunter declares that he is taking the mechanical monster's life, pulling the trigger to unleash a colossal beam of concentrated crimson energy from his gun. This devastating blast tears through the frozen air, instantly vaporizing everything in its direct path, and slams directly into the armored predator with the force of a tactical nuclear strike. Even though the beast desperately tries to counter with its own purple magical laser beam, this hunter's overpowered crimson blast completely swallows the creature's attack without slowing down, engulfing the entire block in a blinding shockwave of pure unadulterated destructive power. Within seconds, the colossal mechanical nightmare is utterly disintegrated, leaving absolutely nothing behind. As the remaining magical particles slowly dissolve into the air around our victorious protagonist, suddenly, time resumes its normal flow, sending the frozen car crashing heavily onto the asphalt, while the hunter casually notes that he needs to reclaim the lifespan he just sacrificed. Right on cue, a system notification pops up to confirm the target has been destroyed, rewarding him with a massive chunk of stolen life count for his incredibly stylish victory, which instantly boosts his remaining lifespan from 26 years all the way up to 33. This trembling little girl can only stare in absolute shock at her bizarrely powerful savior, who simply turns around and flashes her a remarkably calm and reassuringly smug smile, before leaping high into the bright blue sky to hunt down the next mechanical threat. This remaining mechanical beast is sent flying back from the sheer force of the impact, while Tendo Mogami holds the terrified little girl close to ensure she is completely safe. And suddenly, a blue-haired female hunter in military uniform rushes onto the scene, announcing that their squad has successfully cleared out all the enemies on their side. Grinning, Tendo praises his reliable comrades for being exactly what he needs right now, before turning his attention back to the trembling child clutching her stuffed bunny, assuring her that she is safe and his allies will help find her family, prompting the grateful kid to look up and ask for his savior's name, which he proudly reveals as Tendo Mogami, a legendary high-ranking conqueror of the dungeons. With the immediate threat neutralized, the squad begins escorting the survivors to safety, as Tendo prepares his team to march directly into the heart of the labyrinth, ready to fulfill their duty as conquerors, the ultimate guardians of a fragile humanity, chronicling the epic journey of a former nobody who became the world's strongest warrior. Now he boldly steps toward the massive portal to face whatever nightmares await inside. Flashback to Shinjuku, Tokyo, where a much younger Tendo is getting cornered in an alleyway, knocked to the ground as his groceries and phone scatter across the dirty asphalt. Meanwhile, a group of arrogant thugs mock him for being completely weak and pathetic, leaving the helpless high schooler to curse his miserable luck in absolute despair. Realizing just how much his powerless existence truly sucks in this cruel world, with the bullies casually debating whether they should finally stop beating him up. This thug suddenly frees mid-beatdown as one of them nervously mentions a rumor about Tendo's family. While our bruised protagonist looks up to see what has terrified his tormentors so badly, a mysterious teenager in a sleek white coat slowly approaches them from the shadows, revealing a cold, silver-haired teenager wearing a high-tech eye patch over his right eye. Instantly, the bullies lose all their confidence upon recognizing the genius younger brother of the Mogami twins, who happens to be Reiji Mogami, a legendary 16-year-old national conqueror and Japan's absolute strongest warrior. Terrified of his overwhelming presence, the thugs cower in fear and assume he is going to eliminate them. But the elite hunter doesn't even spare them a single glance as he casually walks past, completely ignoring the bullies to step right up to his battered older brother kneeling on the pavement. Tendo weakly calls out his sibling's name, hoping for some shred of familial warmth in this dark alley, only to be met with a freezing glare and a brutally dismissive remark about how pathetic he is. Reiji keeps walking, coldly asking why Tendo lacks the spirit to even fight back against his tormentors. This harsh rejection delights the thugs, who loudly mock Tendo for being the family's ultimate embarrassment, leaving our protagonist to grit his teeth in absolute shame as his own brother abandons him. Suddenly, the bullies notice another elite warrior walking alongside the genius, sparking their immediate awe. Introducing a beautiful blue-haired girl carrying a sword who matches Reiji's prestigious rank and status, as she briefly glances back at the bruised teenager left behind in the dirt. This beaten teen can only stare at her in silent wonder, completely captivated by her striking presence. Unfortunately, the thugs quickly ruin the moment by laughing at the massive gap between the twin brothers, forcing Tendo to reflect on the exact moment their paths diverged so drastically into light and shadow. It all goes back to that fateful day when everything changed for the young brothers. Back when they were just innocent kids who believed they could conquer the entire world, running around with absolutely zero fears about what the future might hold for them. But that sweet, baseless confidence was destined to be brutally ripped away from them, as a massive, terrifying purple portal suddenly manifested right in the middle of their city. shattering Tendo's peaceful life forever during the catastrophic event 5 years ago. Dark abyssal cracks tore through the earth, swallowing up helpless citizens as he fled in terror, leaving the poor kid crying and utterly paralyzed by the sheer horror of the disaster. Meanwhile, his brother Reiji was falling deep into the dark void, desperately reaching out for help, while the newly spawned labyrinth began consuming everything and everyone in its immediate path, ultimately swallowing Tendo's entire family and leaving him as the sole survivor on the surface. Authorities quickly barricaded the massive anomaly as helicopters swarmed the night sky to investigate, and soon after, a traumatized Tendo sat shivering in a cold, sterile hospital waiting room, only to receive the shocking news that Reiji had somehow managed to survive the dungeon, which immediately turned his younger sibling into a national sensation across every major news channel. This sudden revelation only crushed Tendo's spirit further as intense guilt began to consume him, remembering how he did absolutely nothing but weep while his family screamed for help, too terrified to even reach out and grab his brother's hand during that final moment, sinking into deep shame as he closed his eyes to block out the painful memories, forever splitting their paths as one walked into the light while the other remained in shadow. Reiji's face is plastered all over public screens as Japan's absolute strongest national conqueror, while Tendo walks by in the shadows feeling like a complete and utter failure, especially when random strangers mock him behind his back as the genius brother's useless bug, a cruel nickname that cuts deep and reminds him of his pathetic place in society, though he silently admits to himself that the title is actually pretty accurate, standing as the only talentless blemish on his legendary younger brother's perfect reputation. This is Tendo Mogami, a bruised teenager trapped in a cycle of endless self-pity, getting absolutely wrecked by local thugs who treat him like a human punching bag, coughing up blood while assuming his elite brother still hates him for the past, wondering what a weakling like him could have possibly done to save anyone anyway, clenching his fist in useless frustration at his own inability to fight back. Suddenly, the thugs stop their beatdown as a strange purple glow illuminates the alley, drawing Tendo's tearful gaze upward as the atmosphere completely shifts around them, reflecting a terrifying celestial anomaly directly inside his wide, trembling eyes as he freezes. A massive purple portal begins tearing through the sky right above their heads, sending the bully scrambling in pure panic while Tendo stares in absolute disbelief, realizing that a highly dangerous dungeon labyrinth is manifesting right in front of him, as a single droplet of pure concentrated dark energy falls from the vortex, cracking the very air with ominous power as it descends toward the helpless teenager, leaving him completely cornered by a cosmic force that is about to change everything. This dark, corrupting energy wraps around Tendo's limbs, pinning him to the cold ground. Dragging him down, the shadowy mass begins swallowing him whole despite his desperate struggles, and within seconds he is completely pulled under into the pitch-black abyss. Suddenly, a glowing blue system interface begins analyzing his body and fixing his physical age, leaving the terrified teenager to plummet through a digital void of pure, blinding light, which officially registers him as a brand new conqueror before completing the bizarre sequence. A massive holographic notification flashes to welcome him directly into the terrifying labyrinth, sending him spiraling through a chaotic vortex of raw, unmitigated magical energy, until he finally wakes up flat on his back, staring at a concrete ceiling, rubbing his head in absolute confusion as he tries to process what just happened. Looking around, he realizes he is trapped in a massive underground structure with other survivors, instantly realizing that they have all been dragged directly into a deadly active dungeon. But before he can panic, a glowing blue targeting reticle suddenly manifests inside his eye, prompting him to touch his face in sheer disbelief at this bizarre new visual interface, as the HUD actively scans his surroundings and projects digital data directly into his field of vision. This system window displays a life count, revealing his remaining lifespan is exactly 69 years, forcing him to freeze in absolute shock as he tries to make sense of these impossible numbers. Meanwhile, his former tormentors are also waking up nearby, screaming in absolute panic, realizing that they can see the exact same bizarre holographic displays floating in the air, while Tendo's system automatically locks onto them, displaying their massive lifespans on his interface. Tendo struggles to process the chaotic situation as the other survivors begin waking up around him, but his confusion is quickly interrupted when someone points toward a strange structure in the distance, revealing two high-tech metallic pedestals standing silently against the cold concrete wall of the underground chamber. Approaching the mysterious objects, our boy watches in awe as one of the cases suddenly slides open, presenting a sleek, futuristic sword that glows with an ominous, high-tech energy right before his eyes. Realizing that these might actually be real labyrinth weapons, he slowly walks over to inspect them closely, hesitantly reaching out his hand to see if he can actually wield such a powerful blade. Meanwhile, one of his former tormentors spots the glowing gear and immediately lets his greed take over, shoving Tendo aside like a piece of trash to snatch the legendary weapon for himself. Grabbing the hilt, the arrogant bully suddenly flinches in confusion at a strange sound only he can hear, prompting Tendo to pick up the second blade while wondering why his bully is talking to himself. Instantly, a cold system voice echoes directly inside Tendo's mind to identify the weapon as a high-frequency sword, before coldly explaining that acquiring this powerful gear requires a massive payment of exactly 30 years of lifespan. The sheer absurdity of the price leaves Tendo completely frozen in absolute horror as he processes the warning, while the clueless bully swings his new sword around, completely ignoring whatever warnings his own system is giving him. Suddenly, Tendo's targeting reticle locks onto the thug, displaying a remaining life count of 83 years, which instantly drops down to 53 years right before his eyes as the transaction is completed. This terrifying drop confirms Tendo's worst fears about the literal cost of surviving inside this deadly dungeon. But the oblivious thug only laughs maniacally, believing he has just secured the ultimate shortcut to absolute power, boasting to his friends that he will easily surpass Japan's strongest warrior with his brand new weapon. Before the arrogant bully can even enjoy his new weapon, a blinding flash slices right through his neck, leaving his terrified friends and a stunned Tendo to watch in absolute, paralyzing horror as blood splatters everywhere. And within seconds, the decapitated bully's body completely disintegrates into a pile of dark, lifeless sand. A menacing silhouette emerges from the shadows directly behind the remains, radiating a terrifying aura of pure malice, revealing a massive, armored insectoid beast that leaps down to corner the remaining survivors in the chamber. Our protagonist instantly recognizes the threat, realizing they are trapped with an active, high-level dungeon monster, which glares back at them with glowing pink eyes and razor-sharp claws dripping with fresh blood, sending the remaining thugs scrambling in absolute panic while the beast stands over its first victim. Tendo can only stare in disbelief, his mind racing as he processes how quickly his bully was obliterated, especially when his targeting reticle locks onto the pile of dust to analyze the deceased thug's status. Watching the holographic display plummet all the way to 0 to confirm that lifespan equals literal survival. But there is no time to mourn as the creature lunges forward to hunt down the rest, its blood-soaked armor flashing ominously as it prepares to slice through another helpless target, forcing our panicked hero to make a split-second decision as his hand instinctively reaches for his weapon. He grabs the hilt and pulls the sleek claymore from its pedestal in a desperate bid for survival, only for the system to instantly deduct 30 years of his life, leaving him with just 39. Realizing he completely screwed up as he sprints away from the monster with his incredibly expensive sword, screaming in frustration at the system for taking his precious years without even giving him a final warning, until he rounds a corner and freezes upon discovering that he has run straight into a dead end, trapping him in a corner as the terrifying beast slowly closes in to finish him off. Clutching the massive blade, Tendo tries to convince himself that a weapon is all he needs, but his trembling hands tell a completely different story as his confidence instantly begins to waver. Stealing his resolve, our terrified protagonist charges forward with a desperate, ear-piercing scream, putting every ounce of his remaining strength into a wild, uncoordinated swing, only for the agile insectoid beast to effortlessly leap right over his blade, leaving Tendo completely wide open as a sickening cracking sound echoes through the chamber. Looking up, he watches the armored monster dive back down with terrifying speed, unleashing a brutal slash that tears right through the air and strikes him down, sending him flying backward as a scream of pure agony rips from his throat, crashing heavily onto the cold concrete floor while the creature looms over him. Blood pools around his shredded leg, leaving him completely immobilized and unable to escape. He can only watch in absolute terror as the beast prepares its final strike, cursing his own pathetic weakness while realizing his journey might end right here. Closing his eyes as tears of bitter regret stream down his face. Suddenly, a blinding flash of blue light slices through the darkness, intercepting the monster, revealing a cold, eye-patch-wearing warrior who effortlessly parries the deadly claws, which leaves Tendo staring upward in absolute disbelief at his sudden savior. This mysterious fighter stands tall, holding a sleek, glowing blade with absolute confidence, mockingly pointing out how pathetic it is to give up while still holding a weapon. Tendo can only tremble on the floor, weakly whispering his legendary brother's name. This savior coldly tells Tendo to go die in a ditch if he lacks the will to live, raising his glowing blade to prove that surviving is the only thing that actually matters. Standing tall, the fighter commands our bruised protagonist to stay back while lightning crackles around his weapon, promising to get the helpless teenager out of this terrifying underground labyrinth alive. Tendo can only stare in absolute shock, wondering why his legendary brother would ever go this far. But their brief moment of quiet is shattered by a sudden blood-curdling scream echoing nearby, revealing that the other survivors are currently being hunted down by more of those insectoid beasts, prompting the eye-patch-wearing warrior to immediately turn back toward the danger without a second thought. Leaping straight into the fray, he declares that risking his life to protect citizens is his duty, showing the true unyielding resolve of what it actually means to be a real hero. Watching him charge ahead, Tendo is completely transfixed by the awe-inspiring sight unfolding before him, realizing this is a core memory he will never forget for the rest of his life. This warrior moves like a blur, completely forgetting his own pain to slice through the monsters, executing a series of brilliant, high-speed strikes that effortlessly tear the deadly beasts apart, dictating the entire trajectory of this chaotic battle with absolute overwhelming martial dominance, while Tendo watches the spectacular display of power with wide, completely starstruck eyes. This legendary back belongs to a true hero, radiating the kind of strength he always dreamed of, sparking a deep, burning desire that will eventually drive our boy to become a legendary conqueror. as he softly whispers his brother's name while the warrior stands victorious in the quiet chamber. Meanwhile, the story shifts back 30 years to Berlin, where the very first mysterious labyrinth egg appeared. Since that fateful day, these terrifying labyrinth eggs have continued popping up all over the globe, prompting global research teams to investigate, though they have only managed to confirm three basic facts. First, once you step inside, the only escape is reaching the absolute deepest point. Second, if you fail to conquer the dungeon, the vicious monsters breeding inside will eventually spill out of the portals to wreak absolute havoc on the outside world. And third, the only weapons capable of killing them must be acquired inside the labyrinth. Naturally, the brave souls who risk their lives to clear these zones are known as raiders, which is exactly what Tendo is thinking about as he follows his mysterious savior. Realizing this basic knowledge is pretty much all he actually knows about these deadly structures, but the eye-patch warrior suddenly looks back, noting that the kid is only partially correct, explaining that being a raider is not a job, but a status forced upon anyone entering, leaving our protagonist completely dumbfounded as he tries to process this sudden, heavy revelation. This veteran warrior continues walking, explaining that the labyrinth physically rewrites the bodies of everyone inside, telling the young man that he needs to remember this crucial detail for his survival, which instantly triggers a memory for Tendo as he recalls his bizarre entry sequence, remembering that strange digital voice that analyzed his body and fixed his physical age, followed by the sudden appearance of that glowing blue interface directly inside his eye, which currently displays a remaining life count of exactly 37 years right before him. Suddenly, the eye-patch-wearing warrior stops dead in his tracks, sensing something is off. While Tendo panics, realizing his precious lifespan just dropped another 2 years for no reason. This warrior explains that the digital numbers floating in Tendo's vision represent his actual lifespan, revealing that a raider's body automatically consumes these precious years to instantly heal any physical damage, prompting Tendo to look down at his shredded pants where his brutal wound used to be. Remembering the terrifying moment the insectoid beast sliced his leg wide open just moments ago, only to realize the injury has completely vanished without leaving even a single scratch behind. While our boy marvels at this insane power, the veteran coldly delivers a grim warning, reminding him that if his remaining lifespan ever drops all the way to zero, his life will instantly end right then and there with absolutely no second chances. This means Tendo can officially forget about ever living a normal life or dying of old age, as any future mistake will reduce him to a pile of dust, just like his bully, especially since more severe wounds will drain his remaining years at an even faster rate. Suddenly, the eye-patch warrior stops talking as his sharp eyes spot a shadow creeping nearby, drawing his glowing blade as he prepares to face another wave of deadly dungeon monsters, which instantly leap down from the ceiling to ambush the two survivors from above. Tendo panics at the sudden threat, but his savior doesn't even flinch at the incoming assault, unleashing a blinding blue slash that tears through the air with absolute, overwhelming force, leaving our protagonist completely frozen in awe as lightning crackles directly before his eyes. This legendary warrior moves like a ghost, effortlessly slicing the beasts apart in a single motion, which leaves Tendo staring in absolute disbelief at the sheer scale of his power, realizing the entire pack of terrifying monsters was completely wiped out in a single fraction of a second. This veteran warrior turns back, preparing to drop some more crucial knowledge on our stunned protagonist, explaining that defeating these dungeon monsters is actually the only way to harvest more precious lifespan, which leaves Tendo staring in confusion as he tries to locate the creature's vital core. Noticing the shattered red crystals lying in pools of dark fluid on the stone floor, he can only laugh nervously, fully aware that such godlike precision is completely beyond his current level. Suddenly, his system reticle locks onto the warrior's back to scan his remaining life count, revealing an absolutely mind-blowing 189 years of accumulated life force left in his pool, prompting our boy to look at his savior with a newfound sense of deep, quiet respect, realizing this legendary fighter has been carrying the weight of humanity on his shoulders this entire time. Stealing his resolve, Tendo tightly grips his massive claymore and vows to stop being so pathetic, following closely behind the veteran as the remaining survivors slowly make their way through the ruins. This eye-patch warrior suddenly breaks the silence, calmly announcing that the exit is just up ahead, leading the exhausted group into a massive ancient chamber illuminated by a strange swirling energy, where a towering purple portal crackles with raw power, offering a direct path back to safety. Our protagonist and the surviving thugs instantly celebrate, thinking their terrifying nightmare is finally over. But the veteran warrior suddenly halts, throwing his arm out to stop them in their tracks, his hand instinctively tightening around his weapon hilt as his sharp senses detect an incoming threat. Within a fraction of a second, a massive shadow crashes down from the high ceiling, revealing another terrifying insectoid beast that blocks their path to freedom with its razor-sharp claws, forcing the legendary fighter to slide his foot back and brace for one final, brutal showdown. Just as the group prepares to move, a stunning female officer in a dark uniform steps forward, revealing herself as Mizusaki, a loyal subordinate who is incredibly relieved to find her captain safe. Though she quickly reports that while they secured some civilians, the situation remains incredibly grim, explaining that several people lost their lives before she could even reach them in the chaos. which suddenly triggers a realization for Tendo as he stares at the beautiful newcomer, pointing a finger as he remembers seeing her alongside his legendary brother in the past, blabbing out a completely unfiltered question about whether she is actually his brother's girlfriend. This instantly offends both of them, with Mizusaki calling him rude while Reiji shuts it down, leaving the two veterans bickering back and forth about their professional boundaries in the dungeon, until Mizusaki finally turns her sharp gaze toward our awkward protagonist to ask who he is, prompting Reiji to reluctantly introduce the teenager as his younger brother with a heavy sigh. Tendo tries to play it cool by offering a friendly handshake and a nervous smile, only for the cold female warrior to instantly call his fake expression completely gross. Realizing she is just as brutal as his brother, Tendo watches them discuss the low monster count, a detail that gives Reiji a deeply unsettling feeling that something far worse is lurking, ordering his subordinate to immediately lead the rescued civilians toward the safety of the exit, while he decides to head back into the dangerous ruins to investigate another dark passage. Watching his brother walk away, Tendo is suddenly overcome with a wave of complex emotions, staring at the legendary back of the hero who saved his life from certain doom, realizing with a bitter laugh that he never even got the chance to say thank you. Mizusaki directs the exhausted survivors toward the glowing portal, promising them a safe return to the outside world. But as the crowd begins lining up, Tendo hesitates and looks back with a lingering sense of unease, prompting the sharp-tongued officer to snap at our dazed protagonist to keep moving instead of blocking the path. Suddenly, a massive pitch-black rift tears open directly in front of the exit gate, shattering their hopes of escape. Mizusaki freezes in absolute shock as a suffocating pressure instantly floods the entire chamber, whipping her head around as she senses a terrifying presence emerging from the dark tier, while a massive blood-red blade crashes down from the void with enough force to split the earth, leaving the veteran female warrior completely wide-eyed as she realizes they are dealing with a boss-level threat. A devastating shockwave rips through the stone floor, threatening to obliterate everyone standing in its path, forcing Mizusaki to leap forward and desperately block the incoming strike with her glowing blade, though the sheer weight of the attack immediately forces a painful groan from her lips, sending her sliding backward as she struggles to comprehend the absurd power behind this single blow. Out of the glitching portal steps a towering, heavily armored knight, radiating a dark purple aura, revealing a terrifying boss monster whose glowing eyes promise nothing but absolute destruction for the survivors, standing as an unstoppable wall of death that completely dwarfs the tiny human fighters below. Tendo can only watch in complete paralyzed horror as his mind struggles to process this sudden nightmare. With a deafening crash, the armored beast unleashes another brutal strike that sends Mizusaki flying into the wall, causing massive chunks of stone to rain down around our protagonist as the chamber begins to collapse, leaving him coughing through the thick dust while desperately trying to understand how everything went wrong so fast, only to see the elite female warrior lying completely motionless on the shattered ground defeated. Just as Tendo turns to follow the fleeing crowd toward the exit, a sudden chill freezes him in place. A blinding flash of red tears through the air slicing right across his face before he can even react, revealing the towering armored knight standing directly behind him, its massive blade dripping with fresh blood. Our boy desperately clutches his face, his vision blurring as intense pain floods his entire system, while the glowing blue system interface immediately flashes red to warn him of severe facial lacerations. Screaming in pure agony, Tendo collapses to the ground as the terrifying boss prepares to strike again, triggering the automatic repair system which instantly drains another 2 years of his precious lifespan. But the armored beast doesn't give him a single second to recover from the shock, raising its massive glowing blade high into the air to deliver a definitive finishing blow, and swinging it down with enough raw power to completely obliterate the helpless teenager. Out of nowhere, Reiji leaps into the fray, desperately blocking the devastating strike with his own glowing blade, shouting his brother's name while Tendo stares up in absolute disbelief at his sudden savior. Even the legendary eye-patch warrior struggles under the absurd weight of the boss's heavy weapon, as the sheer force of the impact cuts deep, sending a spray of blood into the air, forcing Reiji to realize that this monster's strength is on a completely different level. With a deafening crack, his high-grade claymore completely shatters under the pressure of the dark blade. This veteran warrior freezes in pure shock, unable to comprehend how his active weapon was snapped so easily. Meanwhile, the silent, armored knight stands tall, radiating an incredibly oppressive aura of absolute death, leaving Reiji gritting his teeth in frustration as cold sweat pours down his face, clutching his bleeding arm as he desperately tries to figure out a way to survive this hopeless nightmare. Mizusaki lies completely unconscious beneath the heavy stone rubble, leaving Reiji to regret his terrible mistake. Clutching his bleeding arm, the veteran warrior hates the thought of wasting his precious lifespan here. But with no other options left, he tosses his eye patch aside and prepares to go all out, unleashing a blazing green energy blade. His uncovered eye glows with a terrifying crimson light, which leaves Tendo screaming in absolute panic as he stares at his brother's mangled arm. Reiji coldly brushes it off, claiming a couple of lost limbs are nothing to a true conqueror, and our protagonist instantly realizes the horrific cost behind those brave words. Scanning his brother's stats, Tendo watches in horror as the system calculates the massive toll, as the legendary fighter's remaining lifespan instantly plummets from 189 down to just 156. Yet Reiji doesn't hesitate for a single second, determined to end this battle in a flash, activating his ultimate skill, the legendary Eyes of Chronostasis, to completely turn the tide. A complex magic circle manifests directly inside his glowing red pupil, radiating an overwhelming pressure. Just as the towering boss monster leaps forward to crush them both from above, triggering the absolute power of stop time to freeze the entire world in place. This massive armored beast instantly locks up mid-air, completely paralyzed by the golden temporal chains, allowing Reiji to effortlessly close the distance while his target remains totally helpless, deactivating the time stop at the absolute perfect moment to catch the beast off guard, slipping right past the frozen giant with the grace of a seasoned phantom, and unleashing a devastating green slash that tears directly through the monster's heavy armor. Reiji slides to a halt, but his eyes suddenly widen in shock as something goes wrong. Reiji's devastating slash barely leaves a scratch on the towering armored knight, leaving the veteran shocked to find the creature's core completely intact after his best attack, forcing him to brace himself with his remaining arm as his energy blade crackles wildly, while the terrifying boss stands tall, proving to be on a completely different level. Suddenly, the armored beast ignores the captain entirely and lunges straight toward our helpless protagonist, prompting Reiji to gasp in horror as he realizes his little brother is the target, immediately forcing him to activate his time-stopping ability once again to close the distance. This world freezes in a golden hue just as the massive blade hangs inches above Tendo, allowing the swift captain to dive in and pull his brother out of harm's way, sending the dazed teenager sliding safely across the stone floor with a painful groan. With his brother finally out of danger, Reiji immediately pivots back toward the frozen monster, deactivating his ultimate skill to let the flow of time resume at full speed, which lets the boss's heavy strike crash violently into the empty ground where Tendo stood, shattering the ancient stone tiles and sending massive debris flying in every direction. Before the dust can even settle, Reiji intercepts the beast with a brilliant green clash, mockingly reminding the giant knight that his real opponent is still standing right here, unleashing a massive shockwave that ripples through the entire chamber as they trade blows. Tendo can only watch from the sidelines, completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of combat, clutching his bleeding face in utter confusion as he tries to comprehend this insane power. Realizing just how far he is from ever reaching his brother's legendary level, this massive armored boss is completely locked mid-air, paralyzed by the glowing golden rings of stop time, leaving Tendo staring in absolute disbelief as he tries to process this impossible temporal magic, while the towering beast remains utterly helpless, suspended in the air like a giant statue. This gives Reiji the perfect opening to close the distance and prepare a devastating counterattack, unleashing a brilliant green energy slash that collides heavily against the monster's thick armor. Watching from below, our protagonist wonders if those glowing rings are the source of this power. But the veteran captain is already moving, sliding across the stone floor to dodge a counter, prompting Tendo to lock eyes with his brother and make a shocking discovery. Another blinding green strike tears through the air, keeping the armored giant on the defensive, as the injured teenager realizes the true secret behind his brother's godlike speed, focusing entirely on that glowing red pupil which is actively channeling an immense magical pressure, sending the massive knight crashing backward through the air from the sheer force of the impact. Suddenly, the blue system interface flashes before Tendo's eyes, displaying his brother's remaining lifespan, which instantly begins to tick down with terrifying speed right in front of him, dropping another full year in a matter of seconds as the clock relentlessly drains away, forcing the legendary warrior to push through the immense physical strain of his ultimate ability, with Tendo standing paralyzed by the horrific realization of what this power actually costs. Reiji strikes again with relentless precision, catching the armored beast completely off guard from behind, finally leaving a visible crack on the monster's glowing red core after a brutal struggle. Though as the captain slides back, he realizes this desperate battle has only just begun. Reiji quickly realizes he can't land a decisive finishing blow with only one working arm, as the massive armored knight breaks free from the temporal chains and launches another assault, unleashing a terrifying wave of dark energy that forces the veteran captain to dodge backward, prompting Tendo to scream his brother's name in absolute panic as the situation rapidly deteriorates. Watching the legendary warrior struggle, our protagonist realizes they are both running out of options, clutching his weapon with trembling hands as he desperately tries to summon the courage to help, but his body completely freezes up as the sheer terror of the beast paralyzes him, leaving him drowning in self-doubt about what a weakling like him could possibly accomplish here, until Reiji suddenly barks out a sharp command, snapping the dazed teenager out of his trance. This captain demands to know how long he plans to stand there like a useless scarecrow, coldly telling his little brother that he is only blocking the way and needs to move. This harsh reality check hits hard, making Tendo feel like nothing more than a pathetic bug, convincing himself that a genius like his brother could never lose to a monster like this, which means the only logical thing for a useless deadweight to do right now is to turn around and run away from this terrifying battlefield as fast as possible. But as he flees, his system interface suddenly locks onto Mizusaki's body beneath the heavy rubble, revealing that the elite female warrior is actually still breathing and desperately groaning for help. forcing our boy to halt in his tracks as he realizes she is still alive. Looking back toward the chaotic clash as a shocking realization begins to dawn on him, understanding that his brother has been taking the brunt of this nightmare just to protect them. Reiji stands tall against the towering boss, determined to buy enough time for his brother to escape. But Tendo can only stare back in absolute horror at his brother's mangled, bleeding arm. Knowing he is completely useless here, the terrified teenager forces himself to keep moving forward. He sprints away as fast as his legs can carry him, leaving the battlefield behind. Meanwhile, Reiji leaps back into the fray, unleashing another brilliant green slash against the giant. Once again, the golden rings of stop time lock the massive armored beast in place, allowing the veteran captain to slide underneath and deliver a devastating blow to its chest. This impact hits perfectly, causing the monster's glowing red core to crack even further. Straining under the immense physical toll, Reiji's red eye glows as his lifespan continues to drain. But the unstoppable boss immediately breaks free from the temporal chains with a deafening roar, unleashing a massive burst of dark energy spikes that shoot directly toward the exhausted warrior. He desperately swings his energy blade to deflect the incoming barrage of lethal black tendrils. Yet his eyes widen in pure shock as a massive shadow looms directly over him, triggering a sudden memory of a sunny day from their childhood next to a buzzing beehive, where a 7-year-old Reiji stood trembling with a stick, crying that the task was impossible, while the neighborhood bullies pushed him down, demanding he hit the nest and run away. Laughing hysterically at the crying boy, who was too terrified to even make a move, suddenly a shadow fell over the bullies as something sticky splashed right onto their faces, revealing a young Tendo smiling brightly, proudly stepping up to protect his beloved little brother, leaving the stunned bullies covered in sweet honey as they screamed in absolute confusion. Realizing he had to act fast, young Tendo grabbed a sticky beehive and yelled out, smashing the nest directly in front of the bullies to unleash a swarm of angry bees, sending the terrified kids running for their lives as the buzzing horde chased them down, even though our young protagonist had to sprint away from his own chaotic mess too. Looking back with a proud grin, the brave older brother promised to always protect him, swearing that no matter what happened, he would always be there to save Reiji, leaving the younger sibling staring in absolute awe at that dazzling, heroic back, inspiring a lifelong dream to one day catch up to his brother's incredible level. Back in the present, Reiji snaps out of the memory as a lethal shadow looms, shocked to see the monster's massive tail split into multiple deadly tendrils, forcing the injured captain to desperately swing his glowing blade to deflect the onslaught, activating his ultimate temporal magic once again as his crimson eye flares with power, freezing the incoming dark spikes mid-air with the golden rings of stop time. Despite the brief pause, the sheer force of the boss's attack pushes him back, making him realize he cannot afford to hold anything back in this desperate struggle, as the blue system interface flashes to show his remaining lifespan dropping to 153, ticking down another year in seconds while the physical strain threatens to drain him dry, knowing that while the monster's glowing core is incredibly close to finally breaking. Landing that one decisive finishing blow feels completely out of reach right now. Yet the legendary warrior charges forward anyway, desperately dodging to find an opening. Reiji slides low across the stone floor, narrowly evading another massive dark spike, focusing his remaining strength into his glowing red eye to activate his temporal magic once more, which successfully traps 6 of the monster's deadly tails in golden rings of stop time, leaving only one active tail left for the veteran captain to worry about during this clash. Knowing his window of opportunity is incredibly brief, the exhausted warrior charges straight ahead, sprinting directly up the vertical path while weaving past the frozen black tendrils, as the towering armored knight prepares its final defense to crush the incoming intruder. But Reiji's resolve only hardens, his crimson eye burning with absolute determination to end this, triggering a painful memory of the day he lost his family to a tragic disaster, blaming his own pathetic weakness for being the only survivor of that horrific nightmare, hating himself for standing by helplessly while others sacrificed everything to keep him safe. That deep-seated guilt of being too small and useless consumed his entire childhood, driving him to join a mysterious training facility to completely rebuild himself from scratch, swinging his sword thousands of times a day until his hands bled from the effort, collapsing onto the wooden floor in absolute exhaustion just to ensure he would never need protection again, even after losing his right eye during his brutal journey to reach the absolute top. This legendary captain refuses to let his past weakness dictate the outcome of this battle, leaping high into the air to bypass the final incoming strike with sheer speed, pushing past his physical limits as a brutal clash draws blood from both sides, hurling his glowing green blade forward in a desperate bid to finally protect his brother. Landing a heavy step, Reiji focuses his temporal magic to freeze another incoming dark spike, then hurls his glowing green blade high into the air to bypass the monster's defense. But the system suddenly announces that the giant boss has fully repaired its damaged arm. Undeterred, the veteran captain leaps up and catches his falling weapon with his left hand, spinning gracefully through the air to deliver what should be the final, decisive blow. He screams in absolute determination, putting every ounce of his remaining strength into this strike, only to gasp in pure shock as a sharp black spike suddenly pierces his body. It turns out the monster hid a secret 7th tail beneath the stone floor this entire time, leaving the bleeding captain staring in disbelief as his ultimate defense is completely bypassed. Desperately, he summons a golden ring of stop time to freeze the impaling tail mid-air, trying to salvage the situation even as the immense physical toll threatens to break him. But the sheer momentum of the brutal clash is simply too much to overcome. With a sickening tear, the monster's tail takes his remaining good arm out of commission, sending the legendary warrior crashing heavily onto the cold stone floor as his strength fails. He lies there utterly defeated, groaning in agonizing pain as his vision begins to fade. Yet his crimson eye flares with absolute defiance as he refuses to let it end here, though his system interface immediately warns him that his target is currently out of sight, as the heavy flow of blood completely blocks his vision and prevents him from aiming. Red warning screens flash rapidly, confirming his temporal magic is disabled and both arms are lost. This legendary captain collapses into silence, his weapon and severed limb lying uselessly nearby. Bleeding out on the cold floor, Reiji desperately clings to consciousness while refusing to give up. Suddenly, a bright red system warning flashes to detect a massive heat source nearby, revealing the armored boss is charging up a devastating energy blast to finish him off. Staring death in the face, the fallen captain remembers his childhood dream of becoming strong, wishing he could have finally reached that dazzling level of absolute perfection. Remembering the heroic older brother who always stood in front to protect him. Slowly opening his heavy eyelids, the battered warrior looks up through the pooling blood, gasping in pure disbelief as a familiar shadow suddenly leaps into the chaotic fray. Because high above the towering monster, Tendo is diving down with his blade raised high, leaving his younger brother completely stunned by this suicidal display of reckless bravery. Our boy screams at the top of his lungs, descending directly toward the beast, channeling every ounce of his fear into a wild, desperate strike to save Reiji, driven by the memory of his childhood promise to never let his brother down, knowing that if he runs away now, he will never forgive his own cowardice. Tears mix with the blood on Reiji's face as he watches his brother fight, while Tendo grips his weapon with both hands, aiming straight for the boss's head, swearing that he will never be able to face forward again if he fails. But the giant armored knight quickly reacts, aiming its glowing core directly at him. Without warning, a colossal beam of purple energy erupts from the monster with deafening force, leaving our terrified protagonist staring down a wall of pure destruction mid-air. Tendo dives straight into the blinding purple beam, completely unable to change his trajectory mid-air. But just as the lethal energy is about to vaporize our helpless protagonist, he freezes in absolute terror, realizing there is absolutely no way to dodge this. Suddenly, Reiji throws his battered body forward, taking the full brunt of the devastating blast. Blood sprays across the chamber as Tendo watches his brother suffer another horrific injury, while his own weapon shatters into useless pieces from the sheer force of the shockwave. This massive impact hurls the terrified teenager backward, crashing violently onto the stone floor, leaving him groveling in pain while realizing the boss has an arsenal of deadly attacks. Looking up with trembling eyes, he gasps as a bright light illuminates the dark room, shocked to see the armored giant immediately charging up another devastating energy blast. At that exact moment, Reiji's limp, bleeding body falls heavily from the air, shielding his younger brother one last time as the purple beam narrowly misses them. Screaming his brother's name in pure agony, Tendo desperately clings to the fallen captain, while the unstoppable monster looms in the background, preparing to finish them both off. Tears stream down his face as he frantically demands to know why Reiji saved him, only to receive absolute silence from the unconscious warrior who is rapidly losing blood. Suddenly, a glowing blue system interface appears, showing Reiji's remaining lifespan at 57 years. But the numbers begin ticking down at an alarming rate, dropping years in mere seconds. Weakly opening his eyes, the dying captain mutters that he still refuses to acknowledge him, recalling how his older brother once had baseless confidence before completely breaking down. Reiji tells Tendo he will never acknowledge him, leaving the older brother completely stunned. Tendo stands frozen in grief, staring down at his dying sibling on the cold floor. But the dying captain weakly commands him to keep facing forward and never stop running, forcing the terrified teenager to stare back with wide, tear-filled eyes as the weight sinks in. This bloody warrior screams at him to keep moving, refusing to let him give up now, recalling how his older brother used to always charge ahead regardless of the obstacles, remembering how he would always grin like an idiot and somehow pull off a victory. Blood pools around the fallen captain as his voice fades during his final words, asking if that unstoppable hero is still the person standing right in front of him. Tears stream down Tendo's face as he listens to his brother's heartbreaking speech. When suddenly a strange glitchy sensation begins to distort his vision with intense static, he clutches his left eye in absolute agony as a searing heat begins to burn, while a blue system notification pops up to announce a weapon transfer has officially started. This glowing interface reflects directly inside his pupil, revealing the legendary Regulus weapon is migrating, as Reiji weakly smiles, offering up his ultimate power to save his brother's life. Red energy flares wildly around Tendo's eye as the transfer progress bar hits 17%. Tendo screams for his brother to stop, terrified of the price Reiji is paying, yet the fading captain ignores the pleas, determined to pass on his legacy regardless, leaving our protagonist crying out in vain as the transfer bar rapidly climbs higher, while Reiji's fading eye closes, ready to face whatever twisted fate awaits them next. Reiji looks up with his final breath, desperately telling his brother not to lose, reminding Tendo that he is still his hero even as the light fades from his eyes. Suddenly, a blue system notification flashes to confirm the legendary weapon transfer is finally complete. Meanwhile, the towering armored boss looms in the distance, ready to wipe them both out, charging up its glowing core to unleash another devastating wave of pure destruction, which violently shatters the stone floor and sends a massive shockwave ripping through the chamber. But just as the lethal purple beam erupts to vaporize our helpless protagonist, Tendo looks up through his tears, feeling a sudden surge of overwhelming power within him, as his left eye flares crimson, activating the newly acquired chronostasis temporal magic. This insane ability stops time for any target, but costs a whopping 30 days of lifespan per second. Elsewhere in the ruined chamber, a buried teammate slowly stirs beneath a heavy pile of stone rubble, groaning in absolute agony as she barely clings to consciousness after the brutal blast, slowly pushing herself up from the debris while trying to make sense of the chaos, realizing she must have blacked out for a moment during the initial explosion. Looking up with wide, trembling eyes, she gasps in pure shock at the sight before her, witnessing the giant armored knight diving down to deliver a final, crushing blow, while our protagonist stands directly in the path of the oncoming monster. Terrified for her captain, the brave hunter sprints forward into the fray to help, hurling her remaining dagger through the air in a desperate attempt to distract the beast, which instantly freezes midair inside a glowing golden ring of stop time. This teammate's dagger freezes perfectly in midair, suspended right in front of the monster's glowing core. Seeing this, Tendo suddenly realizes the secret behind his brother's legendary temporal magic. Reiji always made sure his allies could move freely, even while freezing everything else, meaning that objects locked in stop time are completely indestructible until they are released. Armed with this game-changing realization, our protagonist flares his crimson eye with absolute fury, leaping straight toward the giant armored knight to deliver one final, desperate strike, grabbing the indestructible frozen dagger midair as he closes the distance in a flash, thrusting the blade directly into the boss's glowing core with every ounce of his strength, before instantly deactivating his newly acquired temporal magic to let the kinetic force explode. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Tendo unleashes the full impact of his attack, shattering the monster's core as a massive shockwave of energy erupts from the impact point, sending the towering beast reeling backward as crackling blue lightning tears through its armor. This giant knight howls in pure agony as its defensive shell completely disintegrates, while a colossal pillar of pure destructive energy consumes the entire boss in a flash, leaving the battered captain lying silently on the cold floor as the dust begins to settle. Blood pools around the fallen warrior while the remnants of the massive explosion fade away, completely vaporizing the monstrous threat and clearing the ruined chamber of its dark presence. Gasping for breath, Tendo stares at the empty space where the giant boss once stood, landing heavily on the stone floor as the immense physical toll finally catches up to him, letting out a wild, exhausted roar of victory to mark the end of this brutal nightmare. With his brother's power surging through him, Tendo delivers a final devastating strike. This massive blow connects directly with the boss's core, shattering its armor into pieces. A colossal explosion of blue lightning consumes the chamber, throwing our exhausted protagonist backward. Sliding across the cracked stone floor, the battered teenager desperately calls out for his brother. Blinding light from the blast slowly begins to fade, leaving behind a quiet, ruined room, revealing that the giant armored knight has been completely vaporized by the insane attack. Staring into the empty space, Tendo suddenly realizes the heavy silence hanging over the chamber. Panic instantly takes over as he scrambles to his feet, sprinting toward the fallen captain. Screaming Reiji's name at the top of his lungs, his voice echoes through the wreckage, but his desperate cries are met with nothing but an agonizing, empty silence. Standing frozen in front of his brother's motionless, bleeding body on the cold floor. Tears well up in his eyes as the harsh reality of the situation finally sinks in. Kneeling beside the fallen warrior, he watches in horror as glowing blue particles begin to drift away. Clenching his teeth in absolute agony while sobbing over the loss of his childhood hero, he lets out a heartbreaking cry, clutching his weapon as his brother's physical form slowly dissolves. Watching from the shadows, their surviving teammate stands silently, deeply moved by the tragic scene, while a green system interface pops up to display Tendo's newly updated hunter status. She silently acknowledges that the fallen captain was a true hero who protected them all, knowing his death will trigger a massive, unavoidable upheaval across the entire nation's hunter society, and our grieving protagonist is destined to stand directly at the center of that oncoming storm. This surviving teammate locks eyes with Tendo, calling him out by his full name. Our boy can only offer a confused laugh, wondering why she is suddenly focusing on him. She immediately points a finger at his face, narrowing down the target of her suspicion, explaining that his newly acquired left eye is far from a standard hunter weapon. This legendary Regulus weapon possesses enough raw power to completely destabilize an entire nation on its own, and he only inherited this god-tier ability because his brother paid the ultimate price. Staring back in absolute shock, Tendo tries to process the sheer weight of his new reality, letting out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh as the absurdity of the situation sinks in. Deep down, he firmly believes that his legendary brother was the one who deserved to survive, clenching his fist tightly on the table while drowning in a wave of survivor's guilt. His teammate watches his emotional breakdown with a solemn, unwavering gaze, preparing to drop another bombshell, apologizing before explaining that there is still one more crucial detail about their labyrinth battle, revealing that the terrifying humanoid boss they fought is highly likely to still be alive. Tendo gasps in disbelief, insisting they killed it, but she calmly explains the rules of the system, pointing out that his remaining lifespan of 35 years did not increase after the fight. A cold, hard proof means his brother's tragic sacrifice might have been entirely in vain, prompting the devastated teenager to slam his fist against the table in pure, helpless rage, cursing his own weakness while she silently lets him vent his overwhelming frustration. Once the dust settles, she looks him dead in the eye and asks a life-changing question, leaving Tendo to scoff in disbelief at the insane suggestion of him becoming a national raider. She explains that stepping up to become a national raider means diving straight back into those deadly labyrinths, pointing out that he will inevitably cross paths with that terrifying humanoid boss once again, giving him the perfect opportunity to finally avenge his fallen brother and finish the job. But Tendo immediately shuts down, calling himself a stain on his brother's legendary legacy. He remembers how he spent his entire life running away while his brother carried every burden, clenching his teeth in absolute self-loathing as the crushing weight of his uselessness sinks in, when suddenly the memory of his brother's bloody face screaming at him to face forward flashes by, sparking a sudden desperate fire deep within our protagonist's eyes as he remembers those final words. Reiji's voice echoes in his mind, commanding him to never stop running no matter what, urging him to keep moving forward until the very moment his own life runs out. Tendo realizes that his brother chose to entrust this incredible power to him for a reason, meaning he cannot afford to drown in regret, no matter how unfair this world is. Staring blankly ahead, he finally accepts the heavy burden of the legendary weapon passed down to him, deciding that even if he cannot believe in himself, he must honor his brother's sacrifice. Walking over to his desk, he looks at an old, dusty photo sitting on the shelf, remembering the bloody, smiling face of the hero who protected him until the very end. This picture reveals a happy childhood memory of the two brothers smiling together in better times, clearing away all of Tendo's doubts as a newfound sense of purpose fills his eyes. He resolves to never betray his brother's feelings, officially declaring his decision to become a national raider, leaving his teammates staring back in silent approval as our hero prepares to face his destiny. Resolving to take his brother's place, Tendo vows to carry out everything Reiji would have done, promising to live a life that his late brother would truly be proud of. Mizusaki stares back with a completely unreadable expression, letting his dramatic declaration hang in the air, before suddenly flashing a mischievous smirk and agreeing that they should get moving. But instead of a handshake, she instantly slaps a pair of heavy metal handcuffs on him. Smiling brightly, she cheerfully announces that she is officially arresting him right then and there, leaving our newly motivated hero completely dumbfounded by this sudden betrayal of trust. Soon, they are cruising down the highway in a sleek, high-security transport vehicle, where Tendo awkwardly tries to convince his captors that he has absolutely no intention of escaping, desperately begging them to at least unlock the cuffs since he is cooperating, only for Mizusaki to coldly shut him down, calling it standard procedure he just has to endure. When he asks where they are heading, she reveals they are going straight to close headquarters, explaining that the higher-ups simply delegated the task of bringing him in to her, suddenly realizing he was completely played. Tendo mutters about this supposed voluntary questioning, though she quickly points out that he never actually had the right to refuse anyway. At that moment, the driver chimes in to correct our boy's naive assumptions, introducing himself as Officer Uno before explaining that Regulus weapon users are far too dangerous to leave alone, adding that he should actually be in full body-free restraints given the sheer power he now possesses. It turns out Mizusaki actually went to bat for him, convincing the bosses to go easy, warning Tendo to remember his place since this special treatment is solely because of his brother's legacy. Mizusaki cuts off the driver, explaining that keeping Tendo in cuffs is just a matter of convenience, prompting Officer Uno to quickly adjust his glasses and offer a sheepish apology for his bluntness, while our protagonist sits in silence, trying to process the sheer absurdity of his current situation. She tells him not to sweat it, casually brushing off the harsh reality of hunter politics. Suddenly, a frantic emergency broadcast blares through the radio, announcing a massive breach at Narima Base, sending a jolt of pure panic through Tendo as his crimson eye flares with sudden dread, as terrifying biomechanical monsters begin pouring out of the dungeon and into the human world. Clenching her teeth, she taps her earpiece in frustration, cursing the absolute worst timing for a dungeon break, immediately ordering the driver to pull a sharp U-turn and head straight toward the chaos. This sudden drift sends our handcuffed hero flying across the back seat, earning him a sharp scolding. Scrambling for balance, he frantically asks if the breach is happening in the abandoned zone, which she confirms, explaining that neglected dungeons will eventually overflow and release monsters into the wild. Tendo's face pales as he realizes only rookies are left to defend the base right now, calling out their paper-thin security while desperately trying to secure his seatbelt with handcuffed wrists. Mizusaki snaps back that they are severely short-staffed, urging the driver to push the vehicle's limits. High above, a helicopter patrols the massive concrete walls built to contain the ruined containment zone, where a terrifying swarm of insectoid beasts is actively tearing through the defensive barriers. Heavy artillery and energy blasts rain down on the advancing horde in a desperate defense, filling the sky with explosions as the military tries to suppress the overwhelming monster surge. On the ground, terrified investigators fire their weapons, praying they can hold out until backup arrives. On the front lines, the defensive forces are instantly torn apart by a blinding pink slash, as the biomechanical beasts easily slice through the remaining guards with their razor-sharp claws. Meanwhile, the high-security transport vehicle speeds deep into the desolate, ruined streets of the city, prompting Tendo to stare out the window in shock at the completely abandoned evacuation zone. Screeching to a sudden halt, Mizusaki steps out of the car with a grim expression, immediately spotting the massive concrete wall that has been completely shattered at its base. Pulling out her monocular, she quickly scans the battlefield to assess the chaotic situation, only to witness the rookie defenders getting absolutely overwhelmed by the endless swarm of monsters. She realizes with growing dread that the creatures will soon breach the outer perimeter, which prompts Tendo to frantically ask if they are just going to stand by. Still bound by his heavy metal handcuffs, our boy struggles to sit up in the back seat, but Mizusaki calmly explains that the entire area was permanently evacuated over 10 years ago, leaving Tendo to desperately argue that the active defenders still need his immediate help. Turning back with a cold glare, she firmly reminds him that he is still a civilian. Our protagonist can only stare in shock as he tries to process her strict warning. Grabbing her weapon case, she emphasizes that unauthorized civilian combat is strictly forbidden by the association, pointing out that any illegal action outside of a labyrinth cannot be covered up, meaning the association will ruthlessly punish anyone who dares to break their absolute rules. She leans in close to make sure her warning has fully registered with him, reminding Tendo that his legendary eye burns an entire month of his life for every second used. Tendo can only watch in silence as Mizusaki prepares to throw herself directly into the danger zone, stepping out of the vehicle while instructing the driver to keep a close eye on their captive, leaving our handcuffed hero desperately shouting after her as the driver coldly acknowledges the order. Drawing her high-tech weapon, the elite hunter wastes no time preparing for a brutal clash, launching herself into the air with a sudden, blinding surge of crackling blue lightning energy. She unleashes a devastating electrical strike that completely obliterates the first wave of advancing monsters, sending shockwaves and debris flying past the transport vehicle as Tendo watches in absolute awe. He is completely stunned by her insane physical capabilities, wondering how anyone can jump that high, while she continues zipping through the ruined streets like a human thunderbolt, tearing monsters apart. Suddenly, a violent jolt sends our protagonist tumbling across the back seat as the driver maneuvers frantically, harshly reminding the teenager to know his place instead of dreaming about playing the hero. This driver barks that a useless amateur like him could never compare to his legendary brother. Grimacing in silence, Tendo absorbs the painful truth of those words, clenching his jaw in frustration. Fully aware that he lacks the heroic strength that made Rigi a beloved national savior, admitting to himself that nobody understands his own pathetic limitations better than he does. But as he stares out the window, his eyes suddenly widen in pure instinctual horror, his newly inherited crimson eye flaring with sudden panic as he spots a critical disaster unfolding. Right outside, a lone rookie defender with a glowing energy sword is cornered by a beast, only for a devastating pink slash to instantly shatter her defenses and send her flying backward, leaving the terrified young investigator completely defenseless on the ground as her broken weapon slips away. This biomechanical monster looms over the fallen rookie, preparing to deliver a fatal blow, prompting Tendo to recklessly throw open the car door and leap into the street, tumbling violently across the hard asphalt as the transport vehicle screeches to a halt, leaving the driver completely dumbfounded by our hero's sudden suicidal stunt. Pushing himself up despite the heavy metal cuffs still binding his wrists, he sprints directly toward the danger while the driver screams at him to stop, instantly spotting the terrifying beast as it prepares to slice the defenseless girl. Our boy hesitates for a split second, wondering if he actually has what it takes, before his crimson eye flares with power, cementing his resolve to never run away again. This chaotic rescue attempt actually started minutes earlier when the radio blared an emergency alert, sending a jolt of panic through the car as the broadcast repeated the warning, forcing Mizusaki to immediately redirect their course toward the active dungeon break, ordering the driver to head straight into the heart of the danger zone. Their heavy transport vehicle pulled a sharp smoking drift on the empty highway, tossing our handcuffed protagonist violently across the back seat in absolute chaos. She barked at him to put his seatbelt on as they accelerated, while Tendo frantically asked if they were heading to the ruined district, which she confirmed, explaining how neglected dungeons eventually overflow if left unmonitored. Mizusaki warned him that only inexperienced rookies were left to defend the base, making our hero completely appalled by their paper-thin security as they rushed into the fray. Mizusaki urges the driver to hurry up before things get completely out of hand, while high above, a patrol helicopter monitors the massive concrete walls built to contain the zone, where a terrifying swarm of biomechanical beasts is actively tearing through the defenses. Heavy artillery and energy blasts rain down in a desperate attempt to suppress them, filling the sky with explosions as the endless monster horde continues to advance. On the ground, terrified investigators fire their weapons, praying they can hold the line, desperately shouting for everyone to hang on until the elite national raiders finally arrive. but a blinding pink instantly tears through their defenses with terrifying ease, leaving the frontline forces completely decimated as the beasts slice through them in seconds. These bloodthirsty monsters loom over the fallen defenders, ready to claim the entire city, while the high-security transport vehicle speeds deep into the desolate, ruined streets. Staring out the window, Tendo takes in the haunting sight of the abandoned ruins, realizing with a heavy heart that they have officially entered the Narima evacuation zone. Suddenly, the car screeches to a violent halt, kicking up a massive cloud of dust, prompting Mizusaki to immediately step out of the vehicle to assess the situation, only to find that the base's massive defensive wall has been completely breached. Pulling out her monocular, she quickly scans the chaotic battlefield to see how bad it is. Witnessing the rookie defenders getting absolutely overwhelmed by the sheer number of monsters, she realizes with growing dread that the beasts will soon escape into the civilian areas, which prompts our handcuffed hero to frantically ask if she is really going in alone. Mizusaki explains that the entire district was permanently evacuated over 10 years ago, leaving no civilians behind, but Tendo desperately argues that the active defenders still need his immediate help right now, prompting her to coldly remind him that unauthorized civilian weapon use is strictly forbidden by the association, warning our protagonist that any illegal actions outside of a labyrinth cannot be covered up. She leans in close to make sure her warning has fully registered with him, reminding Tendo that his legendary eye burns an entire month of his life for every single second used. Our handcuffed hero can only stare down in silence as she prepares to face the danger, stepping out of the vehicle while instructing the driver to keep a close eye on their captive, leaving Tendo desperately shouting after her as Officer Uno coldly acknowledges the order. Drawing her high-tech weapon, the elite hunter wastes no time preparing for a brutal clash, launching herself into the air with a sudden blinding surge of crackling blue lightning energy. She unleashes a devastating electrical strike that completely obliterates the first wave of advancing monsters. Tendo is completely stunned by her insane physical capabilities as he watches from the window. Meanwhile, she continues zipping through the ruined streets like a human thunderbolt, tearing monsters apart, until a violent jolt sends our protagonist tumbling across the back seat as the driver maneuvers frantically, harshly reminding the teenager to know his place instead of dreaming about playing the hero. Grimacing in silence, Tendo absorbs the painful truth of those words, clenching his jaw in frustration, fully aware that he lacks the heroic strength that made his brother a beloved national savior. He admits to himself that nobody understands his own pathetic limitations better than he does, but as he stares out the window, his eyes suddenly widen in pure instinctual horror. Staring out the window, Tendo's eyes widen in pure instinctual horror as he spots a critical disaster unfolding, his newly inherited crimson eye flaring with sudden panic as he watches the scene play out. Right outside, a lone rookie defender with a glowing energy sword is cornered by a massive beast, only for a devastating pink slash to instantly shatter her defenses and send her flying backward, leaving the terrified young investigator completely defenseless on the ground as her broken weapon slips away. This biomechanical monster looms over the fallen rookie, preparing to deliver a fatal crushing blow, prompting Tendo to recklessly throw open the car door and leap directly into the street, tumbling violently across the hard asphalt as the transport vehicle screeches to a sudden halt, which leaves the driver completely dumbfounded by our hero's sudden, seemingly suicidal stunt. Pushing himself up despite the heavy metal cuffs still binding his wrists tight, he sprints directly toward the danger while the driver screams at him to get back, instantly spotting the terrifying beast as it prepares to slice the defenseless girl down. Our boy hesitates for a split second, wondering if he actually has what it takes, before his crimson eye flares with power, activating his legendary time stop page ability right now. This driver desperately warns him that he will die if he keeps running forward, but Tendo is already fully committed to saving this girl no matter the cost. With his resolve cemented, the ancient magic circle of his eye fully manifests in the air, freezing the biomechanical monster in place with a glowing golden clock-like seal of power, allowing our hero to slide right under its massive razor-sharp claws just in time, before he frantically calls out to the terrified rookie, hoping he can pull off this insane rescue. Tendo realizes with a shock that his time stop ability froze the rookie defender as well, trying desperately to drag her away only to find she is completely locked in place, leaving him to wonder if he can selectively release her without unfreezing the monster. Suddenly, his eyes land on a nearby trash bin covered by a heavy green net, sparking a brilliant, highly improvised plan to deal with the frozen beast right above them. Deciding to take a massive gamble, our handcuffed hero prepares to put his idea into action, grabbing the sturdy trash net with his bound hands and pulling it free with all his might, throwing the green mesh directly over the massive frozen biomechanical monster in one swift motion. With a sharp glare, he triggers a double activation of his legendary chronostasis eye, freezing the thrown net in midair to lock the beast inside a rigid golden-sealed cage. Confident that this makeshift barrier will temporarily seal the monster's movements, he scans the ground, searching frantically for a way to actually fight back before his time limit runs out. Spotting the fallen rookie's broken energy sword handle lying just a few feet away, he quickly scoops up the device, recognizing it as the exact model his legendary brother used, pressing the activation switch to unleash a brilliant humming blade of pure green energy. Marveling at the weapon's power, Tendo realizes he might actually stand a fighting chance. taking a solid stance over the frozen girl as he prepares to face the threat, focusing his mind to execute a partial deactivation of his time stoppage ability right now. Time instantly resumes, causing the beast to thrash against the frozen net while the girl tumbles, leaving the rookie completely bewildered as she realizes she has been saved by a handcuffed stranger. Tendo lets out a tense breath, realizing just how close he came to getting sliced. Before the rookie girl notices her energy sword is missing, prompting him to quickly apologize, aiming the humming green blade directly at the trapped beast's glowing core with absolute focus. With a fierce battle cry, our boy lunges forward to deliver a decisive strike, deactivating his time stop ability at the exact moment of impact to maximize the damage. This energy blade slices cleanly through the monster, shattering its defenses in a brilliant explosion, leaving the biomechanical beast to screech in agony as it completely disintegrates into dust, while Tendo stands victorious over the remains, catching his breath after the intense clash. Suddenly, a glowing system notification pops up to reveal his remaining lifespan has actually increased, confirming that defeating these high-level monsters actually rewards him with precious stolen years. He celebrates this massive win only for the rescued rookie to ask who he is, her eyes immediately drifting down to the heavy metal cuffs still binding his wrists, causing her to panic as she realizes her savior is technically an escaped criminal. Our hero frantically waves his hands to explain that he is completely innocent, suddenly remembering Mizusaki's harsh warning about the severe penalties for illegal weapon use. Their awkward conversation is cut short when a frantic emergency broadcast echoes through the streets, warning them that a massive horde of beasts has officially breached the perimeter, heading straight toward the civilian sectors where innocent people are completely defenseless against them. Tendo envisions the absolute carnage that will unfold if these monsters escape the ruins, gritting his teeth in pure frustration as his crimson eye flares with dangerous resolve. Determined to prevent a disaster, Tendo leaps forward with his borrowed weapon to face the incoming threat, while multiple biomechanical beasts charge down the street directly toward our brave but heavily outmatched hero, prompting him to tap into his legendary Crimson Eye once again to trigger his time stop ability. A glowing golden seal instantly locks the first monster in place, freezing its deadly momentum. But he doesn't stop there, immediately pushing his limits to trigger a double activation. System notifications rapidly flood the air as he pushes his eye to a staggering quintuple activation, leaving our boy absolutely thrilled to realize his desperate gamble actually worked as intended, with 5 massive monsters now completely frozen in a neat line down the desolate street. Suddenly, the rookie defender springs back into action, charging forward to capitalize on this perfect opening, screaming at Tendo to extend his weapon while he stands there looking completely clueless. She unleashes a devastating energy slash that easily tears through one of the frozen beasts, before turning to instruct our confused hero on how to properly activate his own weapon, forcing Tendo to look down at the high-tech handle with a mix of panic and curiosity. He quickly locates the small selector switch on the grip and flips it with his thumb, which instantly unleashes a massive towering beam of green energy that nearly scares him half to death. This sheer size of the giant energy blade leaves him completely dwarfed and utterly speechless. But the rookie girl screams at him to stop staring and finish them off all at once, inspiring our handcuffed hero to grip the massive weapon with both hands and charge forward, with her fierce command to sweep them all away echoing through the ruined streets. Tendo swings the colossal blade, unleashing a devastating wave of energy that obliterates the remaining monsters. This giant biomechanical monster charges forward, completely unaware of the trap waiting for it. Suddenly, Tendo releases his time stop ability on all targets at the exact moment of impact, unleashing a massive wave of energy that completely obliterates the front line of beasts. Meanwhile, a mysterious summoner watches the chaos unfold with a smug grin on his face, summoning the colossal Slime King to join the fray alongside his loyal beast companions, while a giant blue gorilla charges straight into the battle with a deafening roar. Back on the street, Tendo's borrowed energy blade slices cleanly through another mechanical monster, perfecting his strategy of freezing enemies in place and releasing them right before striking. Realizing that none of these creatures stand a single chance against his broken ability, he watches as the remaining beasts disintegrate into piles of digital dust, absolutely thrilled by the endless possibilities of his newly inherited chronostasis eye. This final monster screeches in agony as the devastating energy strike tears it apart, leaving our handcuffed hero standing victorious over the smoking ruins of the battlefield, only for a sudden, terrifying chill to run straight down his spine. Turning around slowly, he finds an incredibly angry Mizusaki glaring right at him, prompting Tendo to nervously stammer out a pathetic excuse while holding his weapon, but she immediately cuts him off to scold him for recklessly stacking his abilities, pointing out the glowing system window that displays his rapidly draining life count. Our boy panics instantly as he realizes his remaining lifespan has plummeted to 27 years, while the elite hunter coldly explains that stacking time stops multiplies the deadly cost. Tendo's jaw drops as he realizes stacking his time stop just cost him almost 5 whole years, and to make matters worse, Mizusaki points out that small free monsters barely reward any lifespan back, leaving our boy to collapse onto the pavement in absolute despair over his terrible math skills. Suddenly, a sharp metallic ring echoes through the air as a blade flashes right past his face, slicing clean through his heavy metal cuffs to finally grant him some much-needed freedom. He looks up in complete shock, wondering if she is actually allowed to just let him go. But the elite hunter calmly explains that his reckless stunt actually turned the tide of this battle, warning him to prepare himself if he truly plans on surviving the chaos ahead. Right on cue, a massive pillar of light erupts from the center of the ruined street, revealing a terrifying biomechanical beast perched high up on a shattered utility pole. This creature begins to writhe as dark energy surges violently through its metallic body, prompting the duo to lock their eyes onto the battlefield's true main attraction. Out of the shadows emerges a massive bat-like nightmare dripping with pure malice, its glowing pink eyes locking onto the defenders with a hunger that promises absolute destruction. Nearby backup forces quickly spot the threat, frantically shouting to alert the rest of the squad, realizing with absolute dread that this monster has just evolved into something far worse. One of the soldiers raises his heavy rifle to take aim from a distance, only for Mizusaki to leap forward, desperately screaming at him to hold his fire. But it is already too late as a massive beam of energy erupts from the barrel. This devastating blast collides directly with the giant beast, triggering a blinding explosion of sparks. This massive bat monster shrugs off the blast, looking down with pure disgust as it mutters how annoying they are, sending a massive jolt of panic straight through Tendo as he realizes what they are dealing with. Because this terrifying biomechanical nightmare didn't just survive the explosion, it actually spoke human language. Flying high into the sky, the beast prepares to retaliate while our hero watches in absolute dread, as hundreds of sharp metallic thorns suddenly sprout all over the monster's dark, leathery wings. Tendo looks up in horror, instantly realizing that a deadly rain of projectiles is about to fall. And right on cue, the bat monster unleashes a massive barrage of spikes straight toward the ground. One of the heavy projectiles crashes right next to a nearby soldier, unleashing a violent shockwave. But the cocky soldier just laughs it off, completely ignoring the glowing red spike embedded in the concrete. Right before the projectile violently detonates, sending the soldier flying through the air in a massive explosion. Horrified by the sudden blast, Tendo immediately sprints through the smoke to check on the fallen fighter, sliding next to his battered body and desperately screaming at him to keep his eyes open, while a glowing system window pops up to remind our hero of his own dangerously low lifespan. This injured soldier coughs up blood, stubbornly insisting he still has enough years left to keep fighting, only for the bat monster's chilling voice to echo from above, mocking their pathetic struggle. It coldly commands them to die gracefully, treating the human defenders like nothing more than annoying pests. Another deadly wave of metallic spikes rains down, aiming to finish off the helpless duo once and for all, prompting Tendo to glare upward as his legendary crimson eye flares to life with absolute fury. Instantly, the falling projectiles freeze perfectly in midair, locked in place by glowing golden rings of time, leaving the colossal bat beast completely stunned as it stares down at its useless attack in utter disbelief. Tendo helps the battered soldier to his feet, asking if he can still stand amidst the chaos. But the flying nightmare barely cares, simply muttering in annoyance as Mizusaki prepares her next move. Charging forward with electric speed, the elite hunter leaps high into the air to strike, unleashing a brilliant flash of lightning that aims directly at the beast's throat. Unfortunately, the agile monster shifts its massive body just enough to evade her deadly blade, leaving Mizusaki completely stunned as she realizes her calculated strike completely missed its mark. She grits her teeth, realizing the beast reacted at the absolute last second to minimize the damage, forcing her to quickly rebound off a nearby skyscraper to regain her footing, before launching herself right back into the sky for another desperate aerial assault. This bat monster glares at her glowing blade, recognizing it as a dangerous labyrinth relic, while Mizusaki focuses all her remaining energy into one final decisive swing. Her sword sweeps in a massive arc, cutting a brilliant trail of light through the air, only to gasp in sheer disbelief as her target suddenly vanishes from her sight, because the clever beast simply flew higher, completely out of her maximum attack range. Crashing hard against a glass window, the elite hunter barely manages to stabilize herself, while the arrogant monster looks down, mockingly calling their human weapons utterly detestable. Clinging to the shattered wall, Mizusaki analyzes the beast's defensive thorn wings, knowing a melee weapon can easily slice them if only she could reach that ridiculous altitude. Down on the street, Tendo watches the aerial struggle with growing dread while shielding his wounded ally. Right before Mizusaki drops back down to the pavement next to him with a heavy thud, Mizusaki yells at Tendo to release his time stop while he looks over in surprise at Yui, prompting the rookie defender to immediately call out for everyone to take a defensive stance, which forces Tendo to deactivate his chronostasis eye and brace himself for the incoming impact. Instantly, a massive barrage of explosive spikes rains down and obliterates the street around them. But Mizusaki leaps in front of our boy, deploying a glowing energy shield from her palm, channeling her mana to reinforce the barrier as the devastating shockwaves rattle the entire area, successfully absorbing the brunt of the explosive spikes and keeping them both completely safe. She quickly radios backup to retrieve the unconscious soldier before the situation gets any worse. Meanwhile, the arrogant bat monster hovers high above, complaining about being swarmed by mere human pests. glaring down with its glowing pink eyes as it vows to ruin their little party, promising to make them pay dearly with their pathetic, short-lived lifespans. It zeroes in on Tendo and Mizusaki, singling them out for a special kind of torment. Our boy desperately drags the wounded soldier back, while Mizusaki stands ready to cover their retreat, causing Yui to look back in sheer panic as the elite hunter takes full command, ordering the rest of the squad to secure the perimeter while she handles the boss herself, before sprinting forward and commanding Tendo to keep up with her electric pace. Suddenly, the flying nightmare unleashes another massive barrage of deadly metallic spikes from the sky, forcing Tendo to grit his teeth and trigger his broken time-stop ability once again, instantly locking every single projectile in place with glowing golden rings of frozen time, leaving the colossal beast completely dumbfounded as its ultimate attack is rendered entirely useless. This bat monster growls in frustration, wondering how its deadly projectiles keep getting frozen in midair. Tendo stares up in absolute shock, realizing his opponent is far more intelligent than he expected. High above the city, the flying nightmare hovers completely out of reach while mocking his desperate defense. Determined to end this threat, our boy tries to focus his gaze to freeze the beast itself. Suddenly, a sharp ringing sound echoes in his mind as a bright orange warning window pops up, leaving him completely stunned as the system declares his legendary time-stop activation has officially failed. Another window flashes to explain that the target is currently sitting way outside his effective range. Tendo's jaw drops as he finally discovers the major weakness of his seemingly broken cheat ability. Turns out, his chronostasis eye can only freeze targets within a specific dome-shaped zone around him, while the massive bat monster down from the sky, completely safe from his temporal magic. Looking up at that ridiculous altitude, our hero realizes he has absolutely no way to touch it. Our boy can only watch helplessly as the flying boss hovers miles above the ruined city streets. He grits his teeth in pure frustration, frantically trying to brainstorm a new survival strategy, only for a strong hand to suddenly grab his collar and yank him backward out of danger, because Mizusaki has leaped back into action, dragging him along as she sprints away from the impact zone. She fiercely commands him to deactivate his time stop immediately, catching him completely off guard, warning him that maintaining the frozen spell is actively draining his precious remaining lifespan by the second. Tendo's eyes widen in panic as he remembers the deadly cost of his overpowered ability. Deactivating his crimson eye, he lets the temporal magic fade away just in time. Instantly, the massive barrage of frozen spikes rains down and obliterates the pavement in a fiery explosion. Running through the fiery streets, Tendo frantically wonders if they should take cover inside a nearby building, but Mizusaki shuts that idea down instantly, ordering him to keep moving while he begs for a plan, because getting trapped inside a collapsing structure under this heavy aerial bombardment would be a total death sentence. Our boy can only panic as explosions rock the pavement, desperately asking what their actual move is. This elite hunter calmly explains that acting as bait will draw the evolved nightmare away from the others, leaving Tendo to repeat the word evolution in absolute dread as they sprint for their lives. Another massive blast tears through the concrete right behind them, proving just how high the stakes are, while the flying boss watches from above, mockingly comparing the fleeing humans to pathetic little insects. Ducking into a brief moment of cover, Mizusaki explains that monsters grow stronger with every slaughter they commit, eventually triggering a unique evolution that completely changes their threat level on the battlefield. This transformation grants them terrifying new abilities, human-like intelligence, and a highly dangerous ego, officially classifying this flying bat nightmare as a highly dangerous level 2 threat, hovering right above them as it smugly greets the duo with chilling amusement. This beast mockingly thanks her for the polite introduction, calling her a gallant young lady, before offering a single piece of advice that boils down to immediate surrender. It peers down with glowing pink eyes, promising a quick end if they comply, though it fully intends to trample them with absolute terror and despair either way. Instead of panicking, Mizusaki casually turns to Tendo and roasts the boss as a mere small fry. This savage insult instantly triggers the arrogant monster, its eyes widening in pure, unadulterated rage, but the elite hunter just smirks, mocking its low intelligence for getting so easily worked up over basic human words. Mizusaki flashes a smug grin at our hero, offering the furious beast some sarcastic congratulations, before casually labeling the terrifying evolved nightmare as nothing more than useless industrial waste, leaving Tendo completely speechless as he realizes she is actively trying to provoke the boss, which instantly offends the arrogant monster, who cannot believe a mere human would insult its evolved form. Screaming in pure rage, the flying beast declares that the little brat talks way too much, unleashing another massive rain of explosive spikes to wipe them off the face of the earth. As a deadly projectile flies straight toward Tendo's face, he frantically reminds her of his warning, but the elite hunter quickly leaps in front of him, deploying her glowing hexagonal shield, instantly absorbing the brunt of the impact as a massive explosion rocks the street. Sprinting through the thick smoke, Mizusaki commands our boy to follow her toward some nearby rubble, leaping over the shattered concrete with her blade drawn to find a temporary moment of cover. Meanwhile, the flying nightmare hovers high above, easily tracking their desperate movements through the ruins. Crouching behind the debris, the duo catches their breath while keeping a close eye on the sky, prompting Mizusaki to explain that she will act as bait while he escapes to safety. Tendo looks down in silence, processing her dangerous plan as the heavy tension hangs in the air. Suddenly, he speaks up, bluntly telling her that she will die if she tries this alone, causing the elite hunter to look back and ask if he is getting cold feet now. Silently rationalizing his sudden fear by reminding herself that he is still just a normal civilian. Only for our boy to look up with absolute resolve, declaring she cannot defeat that monster alone, leaving the seasoned warrior completely stunned as she stares at him in sheer disbelief. Tendo calls out to Mizusaki, who looks back in absolute shock at his sudden declaration, as our boy confidently asks for her help with a crazy plan to bring the beast down, prompting her to ask if he is really willing to risk being used as a pawn. But Tendo completely dismisses her concern, leaving the elite hunter highly skeptical of his sudden confidence, until he looks her dead in the eye and mentions her connection to his legendary brother, Reiji. This name instantly triggers a memory of the former captain who swore never to abandon a civilian, causing Mizusaki to freeze in place as the weight of those words hits her, before she cracks a small smile and jokingly calls his pitch the ultimate pickup line. Fully convinced, she agrees to trust him and asks what her role in this plan is, only for Tendo to grin wildly and demand that she immediately take them off, leaving the elite hunter completely speechless with a hilariously deadpan look of pure disgust. Her mind drifts back to her rookie days in the Labyrinth Conquest Division under Reiji's leadership, where they routinely cleared massive dungeons and left piles of defeated monsters in their wake, recalling how she asked him how he always managed to predict evolved beasts so easily, to which the legendary captain revealed that he grew up alongside an incredibly unpredictable man. Reiji explained that even though his brother fell from grace, his sheer unpredictability was unmatched, making any dungeon monster look incredibly simple and easy to read by comparison. Remembering his gentle expression, she realizes that Tendo possesses that exact same chaotic spark. Snapping back to reality, the elite hunter sprints down the ruined street at blinding speed, ready to put her life on the line for our boy's absolutely insane counterattack. This flying bat monster sneers from above, mocking them for finally showing their faces again, before immediately unleashing another deadly rain of metallic spikes straight down at the street, forcing Mizusaki to deploy her energy shield to block the devastating impact of the blast, while Tendo desperately sprints away to execute his part of their crazy plan. Suddenly, a stray projectile explodes right behind our boy and blows him off his feet, which leaves the elite hunter completely horrified as he screams out in pure agony, as she desperately calls out his name while smoke rises from the blast zone. But Tendo weakly tells her to keep moving and focus on the plan. Trusting his resolve, Mizusaki dashes forward to draw the monster's attention away from him, with our heavily injured hero struggling to even stand up on the shattered pavement. At that exact moment, a sharp warning alarm begins to blare inside his mind, where the system interface displays a massive list of critical injuries and a plummeting lifespan, leaving him completely paralyzed and unable to muster a single ounce of physical strength. High above, the arrogant boss mocks their pathetic struggle, calling the entire fight anticlimactic. Realizing that Tendo was the secret trickster who kept freezing its deadly projectiles, determined to end this annoying game once and for all with another strike. This flying nightmare unleashes a massive, continuous barrage of spikes to overwhelm his defense, prompting our desperate hero to trigger his chronostasis eye with his remaining strength. Instantly, the glowing golden rings lock the deadly projectiles in place mid-air, but the system warns him about a dangerous time lag between his skill activations. Pushing his limits, our boy triggers a double activation of his temporal eye to freeze the incoming projectiles. But even with 2 layers of time stop active, the sheer volume of spikes is overwhelming, and the smug bat monster happily points out that some of its deadly thorns will inevitably slip through. A massive blast immediately tears through the street, sending our heavily injured hero flying through the air. Refusing to stay down, Tendo desperately forces a triple activation of his chronostasis eye to survive, only for the relentless barrage to prove too fast, triggering another massive explosion that blasts him backward, leaving him coughing up blood as his body takes a brutal amount of damage from the impact. To make matters worse, a red system window pops up to confirm his left leg is officially fractured. Gritting his teeth in absolute agony, our boy can only curse his current state of helplessness, while the flying nightmare hovers above, preparing to rain down another endless wave of metallic spikes, mockingly comparing our desperate hero to a pathetic little bird that only knows how to sing one song. This arrogant boss continues to gloat, calling him mere vermin crawling on the ground as he struggles. It smugly points out that using such an overpowered ability is clearly pushing him way past his limits, which is proven right as his system interface flashes a terrifying countdown of his remaining 20-year lifespan, prompting Tendo to remember Mizusaki's grim warning about the true cost of his cheat ability. She had warned him that maintaining the temporal eye drains 30 days of his life for every single second, meaning his current triple-stacked activation is burning 90 days per second, leaving him with only 78 seconds to live. As another deadly rain of spikes descends from the sky to finish him off, our boy realizes he cannot run away and must bet everything on one final desperate stand, unleashing a massive quadruple and quintuple activation of his chronostasis eye to freeze the entire sky. Pushing his temporal eye to the absolute limit burns through his life at a terrifying new rate, while the arrogant boss assumes finishing off our boy is just a matter of time. leaving the entire ruined street completely silent as the heavy smoke begins to settle. Suddenly, the flying nightmare unleashes another massive bombardment to keep them pinned down, prompting Tendo to trigger a sextuple and septuple activation of his temporal eye, instantly freezing the deadly rain of metallic spikes right in the middle of the sky. This sudden pause completely throws the boss off, making it realize something is deeply wrong. Even though it still believes his desperate temporal tricks are ultimately useless against its power. It frantically wonders why he keeps taking these brutal hits instead of running away, scanning the debris below to locate the elite hunter before she can make a move. Another massive blast rocks the concrete, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and debris, but the arrogant beast is left completely stunned when it realizes she has vanished entirely. Crouching in the smoke, our heavily injured hero weakly mutters that his partner is currently busy, flashing a bloody, confident grin as he reveals she is busy executing their real plan. High above the ruined buildings, a shadow leaps through the air at blinding speed. This flying nightmare instantly panics as it realizes the weak human was just acting as bait, looking up in sheer terror as it tries to locate the elite hunter's position, only to find her closing the distance with her weapon drawn and ready to strike. Mizusaki uses the frozen spikes suspended in the air as perfect stepping stones to reach the sky, unleashing a devastating lightning-infused slash to finally bring this arrogant level 2 monster down. This scene shifts to the day after the chaotic Narima operation at the Tokyo headquarters, where our boy Tendo finds himself locked away inside a cold, solitary confinement cell, staring blankly at the clock as his hand continues to tremble from the intense battle. He quietly mutters the name of the terrifying captain who completely derailed their plans. Sue Ryoga, a legendary national strategist with a blazing arm and a massive attitude, who had suddenly dropped right into the middle of the ruined battlefield yesterday afternoon. A massive shockwave blasted the pavement, instantly halting the fight before anyone could even react. And before Tendo could escape, the arrogant captain grabbed him tightly by the collar, unleashing a searing heat from his arm that burned our hero like a branding iron. Checking the guy's stats, Tendo was shocked to see a massive lifespan of over a century, prompting Ryoga to coldly ask if his legendary brother Reiji had truly kicked the bucket. Turning his sharp gaze toward Mizusaki, the captain demanded answers while holding Tendo like trash, leaving the elite hunter sweating as she reluctantly confirmed the tragic news to her superior. Ryoga immediately threw our boy to the ground, calling him absolutely pathetic and weak, declaring that Reiji was just another useless failure who couldn't even survive his final mission. He then accused Mizusaki of breaking serious regulations by letting a civilian use illegal weapons, warning them both that they were being hauled back to headquarters without any negotiation. Back in the present, Tendo sits in his cell, processing the captain's overwhelming power, until Mizusaki suddenly opens the heavy door and quietly tells him it is time to go, walking down the long hallway while softly apologizing for dragging him into this mess. Mizusaki reminds our boy that his cheat ability has left him with only 6 years of lifespan, asking if he still seriously wants to risk his life to become a national raider, prompting Tendo to hesitate as he remembers the legacy of the legendary captain who saved him, before flashing a confident smile and declaring that he absolutely has to keep moving forward. Touched by his resolve, the elite hunter promises to guide him so he never strays from his path, which earns her a cheerful fist bump as our boy happily tells her he is counting on her. Mizusaki hesitates for a second before returning the gesture, cementing their new partnership as allies, only for a bizarre kid hanging upside down from the ceiling to suddenly interrupt their moment, grabbing Tendo by the face to inspect his eyes and confirm the skill transfer was successful. Our startled hero panics, desperately demanding to know who this creepy little intruder even is. This energetic kid casually introduces himself as the eccentric head of the headquarters technical division, dropping down to the floor while showing off a questionable fashion sense of shorts and a lab coat. Tendo immediately notices the white coat is identical to the one worn by the terrifying Sue, realizing this bizarre child is actually a high-ranking captain of the Strategy Division's 3rd unit, who introduces himself as Saigusa Wakaba and happily calls our boy a valuable research sample. Checking his stats, Tendo is shocked to see this powerful captain only has 8 years left to live. Mizusaki crosses her arms, coldly demanding to know what business brought the eccentric scientist to their cell, prompting Wakaba to flash a cheerful grin and tell her there is absolutely nothing to worry about, explaining that all the gear Yui requested for their next move is officially ready to go, leaving both hunters completely bewildered as they wonder what kind of trouble is heading their way now. Leading them down a sterile corridor, the eccentric scientist suddenly calls out to our nervous hero, bluntly declaring that Tendo is completely unfit to inherit the legendary chronostasis eye, explaining that the higher-ups think handing such a powerful weapon to a civilian is absolute madness. But with a mischievous grin, Wakaba admits that letting them take it back would be incredibly boring, prompting him to swipe his keycard and lead the duo toward a massive high-tech chamber, where a blinding beam of light reveals the entrance to Indoor Training Ground number 3. Staring directly into Tendo's eyes, the scientist challenges him to prove the skeptical higher-ups wrong, revealing that he has arranged a sudden mock battle against an active raider to test him, which immediately causes Mizusaki to panic, angrily pointing out she had requested a much weaker opponent. Wakaba casually brushes off her concerns, claiming this guy was simply the only fighter available today. before dropping the bombshell that Tendo is facing the strongest active raider after his late brother. He demands to see if our boy truly deserves the power entrusted to him by a hero, as the massive warrior inside the arena turns around with a terrifyingly familiar, arrogant smirk. Tendo's heart completely stops as he recognizes the brutal captain who beat him down yesterday, leaving the eccentric scientist to sit back and watch the drama unfold from a high ledge. Turns out Ryoga is one of the 4 legendary captains standing at the absolute peak of humanity, a monstrous conqueror of Unit 2 who wields unmatched physical power and a massive attitude. This eccentric kid eagerly watches from above, wondering exactly how our heavily disadvantaged hero plans to survive, while Mizusaki finishes explaining the gear and asks if he is ready to face his nightmare. Gritting his teeth, Tendo realizes losing here means losing his cheat skill and his entire future. Mizusaki gives our boy a firm push forward, catching him completely off guard as he steps up. She bluntly reminds him that the power gap between them is absolute, making this a reckless gamble. But she flashes a warm smile and admits she still believes in his potential. Hearing her words of encouragement gives Tendo the exact boost of confidence he desperately needed, prompting him to march onto the training field with his head held high. Over the intercom, Mizusaki announces that Tendo only needs to land a single hit to win, while the arrogant captain immediately tosses his massive weapon aside, claiming he won't need it, leaving our hero stunned as the legendary warrior prepares to fight him completely barehanded. A terrifying fiery aura erupts from the captain, instantly filling the entire arena with pure dread, making Tendo realize that even with his overpowered temporal eye, he is severely outclassed. Staring at the human monster before him, our boy feels the crushing weight of his presence. Ryoga mockingly points out that Tendo only survived his last mission through sheer dumb luck, flashing a demonic grin as he promises to tear him apart if he forgets his place. Gritting his teeth against the overwhelming pressure, our hero refuses to let fear paralyze him, desperately recalling Mizusaki's crucial advice about syncing his gear and releasing his physical limiter. This advanced system bypasses his natural human limits by sending intense electrical impulses through his body, unleashing a brilliant surge of blue lightning that crackles wildly around his entire frame. As Mizusaki officially declares the start of the match, Tendo charges forward like a bullet, moving at a blinding speed that leaves a trail of electricity in his wake. Feeling lighter than ever, our boy realizes this incredible power might actually give him a fighting chance. Tendo plans to disrupt the captain's stance with a swift opening strike before trapping him, unleashing a high-compression light blade known as Baslart to slice through the air, utilizing the lightweight particle blade designed specifically for high-speed aerial mobility. With a fierce battle cry, our boy lunges forward to deliver a devastating opening blow, but his strike only hits empty air, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Tendo's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he realizes his opponent has completely vanished, only for the terrifying captain to suddenly materialize right behind him like a ghost, delivering a brutal kick that sends our heavily outmatched hero flying across the arena, crashing hard against the concrete floor while blue sparks wildly crackle around his body. Refusing to stay down, Tendo desperately grits his teeth and forces himself to stand up, preparing to activate his overpowered temporal eye to freeze the monster in his tracks. But Ryoga is already behind him again, mockingly whispering that he is far too slow, prompting our panicked hero to quickly raise his hand and activate his defensive gear, deploying the high-tech electromagnetic barrier glove known as Carapace to block the incoming strike, which absorbs the captain's devastating kick with a brilliant flash of blue energy. His relief instantly turns to pure horror as he notices the shield beginning to crack, shattering completely under the sheer physical pressure of the captain's overwhelming power. Our boy collapses to the ground in agony as a system warning alerts him, clutching his fractured ribs while wondering if this guy is even the same species. Realizing his temporal eye is completely useless if his opponent moves faster than his perception, Ryoga stands tall with an arrogant smirk, coldly declaring that it is officially his turn to attack. This monstrous captain launches a devastating strike from above, forcing our boy to quickly deploy his shield. Tendo desperately expands the hexagonal barrier to cover a massive area, hoping to block the incoming impact, but he immediately realizes that stretching the shield so wide makes it incredibly thin and fragile. Ryoga's brutal kick shatters the defense like glass, sending our heavily outmatched hero crashing back down. Mizusaki panics from the sidelines, shouting that spreading the barrier's area drastically reduces its overall durability, while the eccentric scientist watches with a disappointed sigh, wondering if he expected too much from the kid. Sliding across the concrete in pure agony, Tendo clutches his chest as the overwhelming pressure mounts, prompting him to grit his teeth and immediately activate his legendary temporal eye to slow down time. Yet even with time slowed, the captain moves like a ghost, completely bypassing his perception with ease. Our boy stares in absolute horror, realizing he cannot see a single path to victory against this monster, kneeling helplessly on the ground as the giant shadow of the legendary warrior looms over him. Ryoga mockingly insults his amateurish reflexes, questioning why Reiji would ever throw his life away for trash, declaring that the legendary captain ultimately made a foolish mistake, which instantly triggers our hero's deepest rage. Tendo internally admits his own weakness, but his grip on his weapon tightens with newfound fury. Slowly forcing his battered body back up, he refuses to let his savior's legacy be dragged through the dirt. causing both onlookers to gasp as they sense a sudden dramatic shift in the arena's heavy atmosphere. A violent surge of blue lightning crackles wildly around Tendo as he stands tall against his nightmare, earning a surprised smirk from the arrogant captain, who is genuinely amused by this sudden burst of resolve. Glaring with absolute fury, our boy vows that he will never let anyone look down on Reiji's sacrifice.